All right, so I would just like to begin with a small introduction, and then you can carry forward with the presentation. So, good evening to all the students, to all the educators, counselors, and parents who have joined us on day 2 of the Filling Your Common App webinar series. And I welcome Karen Scott from Texas Christian University, who will be taking us through testing. And so much we know that now we have so many doubts related testing and whether we should take it or what's the importance of it. And I'm sure this webinar will be a great insight to it. So, a little about Next Genius. As we know, it is a registered charitable trust in India, and we offer full and both partial tuition scholarships to grade 12 students and also students who are in their gap year. So, our applications for the year 2020-21 is now open, and please visit our website and apply to win outstanding scholarships. And I'm very happy to say that Texas Christian University, TCU, is also one of Next Genius's partner college, and we are very excited to partner with Texas for the year 2020-21 again. So without any further ado, I would ask Karen to take over the presentation and talk about testing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Perfect. And Devika, I just wanted to clarify because we've gotten a couple of questions already in the chat. Would you like students to put their questions in the Q&A?
Right. So I would ask all the students and the parents or educators to post their questions in the Q&A box, and we'll address them towards the 15-minute end of the session, and we'll take the questions then. So meanwhile, or towards the end, they can post the questions there, and then we can pick them towards the end of the session.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, it's wonderful to be here today. This last year at this time, I was in India, and of course I was planning on being in India now, and I'm so disappointed that I'm not, but at least I'm getting a chance to talk to you virtually. But just so you know, I really have been in your fine country. I will share a couple of pictures with you. So this was on a business trip. My husband joined me. Here I am in Kerala one year. And then just last year, my husband came to India with me for the Next Genius interviews, actually, because he works at the university as well. And we took a side trip to Varanasi. So I have been in your beautiful country many times. So I'm going to talk about testing now. And specifically, I'm going to start with the SAT and ACT because I think that's on many people's minds. And the questions in the chat already today had to do with the ACT. So which one? SAT, ACT? Universities really don't care which one. It's a personal preference. Whichever one is easier for you to get would be absolutely fine with us. You could take the SAT or ACT multiple times. And one of the benefits of that is that many universities will super score those tests, which means we take the best subscore from each section, multiple testing dates. So for instance, you take the SAT the first time, you do really well in the reading. You take it again, you go down in reading, but you come up in math. So we may take the old reading and the new math, and then that's your super score, generally, for both admission and scholarship. So a lot of people do that. Where we've gotten questions, especially the last couple of years, about self-reporting test scores. More universities are allowing you now to self-report the scores, but that's going to be up to each university. I know for my institution, if you list it on the Common Application, then we can take it off of there, and you'll see that the SAT, ACT has been marked off of the checklist when you get, an application confirmation. But again, that's going to be up to each university as to whether or not they're going to accept self-reported scores. Okay, so why do we use the SAT or ACT? First of all, I want to say that this is just one piece of the holistic review process. And throughout this weekend of the series of workshops that you're going to get a sense of what holistic review is. You know, we look at many different aspects of your application. It's rarely going to come down to just one thing. Okay, so that's my first point, but it is a standard measure. You know, it does help us compare students from different school systems. You know, some of you are on IB or AP. A lot of you are doing the Indian boards. And so this is one common measure, you know, that all students, you know, can be compared to. Or plus, I know within India, you have different kinds of boards, and some are more competitive than others. Some are known to have tougher grading than others. So again, the SAT is kind of that standard measure. And I'm going to say it again, but it's just one piece of the holistic review process. Is just one piece of the holistic review process. I didn't accidentally write that phrase 3 times on this slide. So I just wanted, you know, to really emphasize that, because I know students really stress out about these tests, and I get it, believe me. So what are the drawbacks of the SAT ACT? You know, a lot of people will say that it's not as good of a predictor of success as the grades in school or your exams, the board exams, etc. There may not be as much test prep in India as there would be, for instance, in the US. In the US, I think, you know, some schools kind of teach to that testing, and they really prepare students. And of course, you know, if you're doing the SATs your final year in high school, you know, especially as it gets closer to the end, I know you guys have the pressure of studying for your Indian boards or your IB exams at the same time you're trying to prepare for the SAT, and it is, you know, it is a lot of pressure on you. And of course, especially the last year or so, we've had terrible issues with accessing these tests and having tests canceled. And I'm not talking about during COVID. I'm talking about, you know, pre-COVID. Now with COVID, of course, there were other issues that testing this past spring, you know, March, April, May, still continuing, you know, tests have been canceled, you know, due to safety measures. And so, you know, for this year in particular, those of you who are going into your final year or in your final year of school, I know that is a huge drawback. So with that, I wanted to address test optional. So many colleges are going to give you the option of submitting the SAT and ACT or not submitting it, especially this year. So for instance, you know, I'll use my own university. We've always required the SAT and ACT of all of our students, including international students, Indian students. But for this year specifically, you know, we're going to be test optional, SAT, ACT optional. So you do need to check websites. You may check websites, you know, closer to the time you're applying again, because universities, I think, are still kind of updating their materials. And most importantly, ask us as admission officers. You know, we're really here for you, especially, you know, now that you're meeting all of us on these webinars. You know who we are. We're going to give you our contact information. So if you're interested, you know, just ask the university if you can't find it on their website. And certainly for the partner universities, Next Genius may know that as well. So there may be a custom question on the Common App that asks if you want if you want your SAT or ACT score to be considered. And so that's what we're doing. So when it asks about testing, there is going to be a separate question that asks, do you want this to be considered? And if you say no, then the college that you're applying to will not look at it. Now, some universities, though, if you report your score, they are going to look at it. So you just be really careful to make sure you know the policy for each place you're applying to. You know, if in doubt, if you're not sure if you want your score to be considered, at least at the time you fill out the Common App, you are welcome to leave that section blank. You don't have to report a score, okay? And for a lot of students, especially if you don't yet have those SAT, ACT scores, you can, when you register for the tests, you can sign up to have them automatically sent to universities, or you can decline that. And so what many students will do is they'll wait until they see their scores, they see the results, and then they decide if they want to send them to the university, okay? Again, especially if it's for a test optional university. Now, if the university is requiring the tests, then you won't have a choice and you eventually have to send those. And so, the question becomes, if the university is test optional, should I submit the SAT or the ACT if I do well? And I would say generally, yes. I mean, if you look at the averages or maybe the middle 50% scoring ranges that a given university reports, and you see that your score is, right in that range, maybe at the high end of that range, maybe even above that range, then certainly, I think it is a good idea to submit those scores. But again, if in doubt, just ask us. So that is my other piece of advice that I'm going to keep telling you. Okay, so we were talking about test optional, and you guys can see my screen, right? I hope. Devika, raise your yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
see.
Perfect. It's a little late for me to ask that. Okay, so is it really test optional? So some colleges, may be test optional for admission, but they may require the SAT or ACT for scholarships. And in the US, universities are not governed by, there's not a standard ministry that regulates what we do and what we consider in the admission process. So each university is free to make its own decisions about what they're going to do with testing or any other elements of the application. And so you really do, have to consult each university to see, if they're truly test optional. And again, we're doing our best to post this very clearly on our website. And I think most universities do have that clear because honestly, testing is probably one of the biggest elements of the application process that students worry about or they have questions about. So you'll also see that some universities are test optional depending on what type of environment you're coming from. So you may see universities say if you're in an IB curriculum, or if the language of instruction at your school is English, or if you're living outside the US, then we will be test optional. So it's not always, the rules don't always apply to every single situation. Some universities, and I would say honestly, many universities, even before this year, are test optional specifically for international students. Okay. Okay. And Devika, feel free to jump in if you think there's any questions I need to answer now, because I'm not watching the Q&A.
Sure, I'll let you know about it.
Okay. So we've been talking about SAT, ACT, but I also wanted to address English proficiency, because that's another big part of the testing. So if English is not your native language, many universities are going to want to see some kind of an English proficiency test. TOEFL and IELTS are the two most common ones. The TOEFL has had a special home edition the last couple of months. That's an online version of their test, which they don't normally do. So you may still see that. IELTS was doing something similar, although I did look on the IELTS website last night, and it looked like their centers were open in India. Many of them are given at the IDP agency offices. But of course, that could change at any point. They may be open now, but if things, with COVID get worse, you may see closures again, and you may have online options for those tests. There's another test that has become super popular the last couple of years, and that's called the Duolingo English Test. And Duolingo actually started as an online tool. So it's always been online. You can take that anytime you want from the comfort of your home. And so many universities do like that and will recommend that, especially with test center closures this year. But not every college accepts Duolingo. Okay. And again, this should be posted on the website. So can English proficiency be waived? Again, this is going to be specific to each university, and like the SAT, ACT, this could be based on the curriculum. So a lot of universities will say, we're going to waive the English proficiency exams if the language of instruction in your school is English, or if your native language is English, with English being so widely spoken in India at most of your schools, but not all. Some universities are going to waive it based on that. Or if you do well on SAT, ACT, we may waive this. Although the English proficiency exams do give us something additional to consider. So for instance, if your SAT reading section is a little bit low, but then you do very well on these English exams, that can reassure an admission officer. And you could get asked about testing when you go to the US Embassy for your interview. That doesn't usually happen, but I've heard that it could happen. So I think it's always a good idea to take one of these English tests because you never know what university you're going to be applying to that may ask for it. And again, ask us. That's the common theme. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and look at the Q&A. And so somebody asked about fee waivers for ACT, and I honestly don't know how to get that fee waiver for the ACT. Maybe, I don't know if Devika, if you guys help them with that, but that would be specifically through the ACT website. In terms of the university fee waiver, like when you're submitting the CommonApp, because that was another question earlier, if getting a CommonApp fee waiver, there's a form that your school counselor, if you have that person, that they can fill out requesting that to be waived. But there's actually a question on the CommonApp about fee waivers, and I know for us, when you check that box saying, yes, I want a fee waiver, it will give you a couple of options. And for us, you can just click the box that says university-based fee waiver. I think most universities are pretty flexible on students asking for fee waivers, and they don't usually ask a lot of questions. So, feel free to check that box. And so again, we've got another question here, and I think I probably addressed this. Should I take the SAT ACT even though many universities have made it test optional? Personally, I would say yes, do take it, because there's a chance that at least one university you're applying to is going to require it. And then, if you suddenly learn, in February that that your dream university requires it and you haven't taken it, then I think you may have regrets. So I would say if you can get access to it, do it. But all of us as universities are going to be watching that very closely. And if test centers, remain closed the next couple months, then I think probably almost everybody will be test optional. But again, if you can get it, I would take it. Maybe don't report the scores yet. Just wait till you get the scores back and then decide. And can we super score with PSAT? Generally speaking, universities don't use the PSAT for admission purposes. That's kind of a practice test for you. And usually we don't even see the PSAT scores. So generally I would say no, the universities aren't going to super score the PSAT. Let's see. This is a good question, is taking the SAT ACT multiple times viewed negatively by the top universities? I would say no. It depends on how many times you take it, though. If you take it 2 times, I would say nobody's going to question that, because most students do take it at least twice, at least prior to this year. Even 3 times. Now, if you take it more times than that, then we start saying, well, yeah, of course she got a higher score because, she's taken it so many times. So I would not take it more than 3 times. I think 2 times is good. But universities generally don't average the score, because I know I sometimes get questions about that for students who are worried about multiple testing. So we're not going to average. Either they take the single highest or they super score, as I talked about earlier. And board exams, again, they are important. I'm just going down the list of questions in order that I got them. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not going to be the biggest component. Generally speaking, universities are going to look at your work in school, and if you've done the Indian boards, they're going to look at your standard 10 board exams. If you have predicted results for your standard 12 boards or predicted IBs, we'll look at that more so than we will test scores. And of course, I can't speak for every university, but that's generally what you find, is the testing is going to be secondary to your academic preparation that you've gotten for 12 years in schooling. So let's see, Duolingo. I think some of these questions came in before I started talking. So here's another question. I see an anonymous attendee is already planning on getting his or her PhD. Awesome, congratulations. There's a whole different set of test scores for master's and PhD programs, and it kind of depends on what program you're applying to. But certainly when it comes to English testing, though, graduate programs will often require exactly the same English tests, but they're not going to require the SAT ACT, because that's really only a test that you take when you're in high school. So wherever you're going to university for your undergraduate program, starting next year, your university is going to guide you regarding which tests are required to get into graduate school. And so, let's see, I think we already answered this question. Someone was not happy with their December 2019 SATs. Yeah, I wouldn't submit it now unless you know that you have to. Here's a question. Will SAT affect my admission or financial aid? And I think we've discussed admissions, but we haven't discussed financial aid yet. And you may be hearing a little more about financial aid later, but this could, if you're requesting a significant financial aid package, and if a university has, limited funding to spread around, then they may, have to consider things like your test scores, your grades in school, everything. Again, it's not going to be the single factor, but it can certainly have an impact on scholarships or financial aid. Okay. So we have a question. I'm an average student, so what are my chances for admission? The greatest thing about the United States is that I think there's a place for everyone. And so oftentimes, you hear about the most competitive universities that admit only a very small number of students. That's not the norm. That's what you hear about, and that's what you're preparing for, because you're in this process, you're trying to compare for the most competitive school that you're applying to. But, there are plenty of colleges and universities that are open to a wide skill range. And I think even within the Next Genius program, if, some of you may be selected or shortlisted for the Next Genius program, and even with the universities in that program, you're going to find some are going to be more flexible in terms of the grades and so forth, the marks that they require. But if you do feel like you're deficient in any area, that could be grades in school, that could be test scores. Maybe you haven't had a chance to be very involved in activities. If you're deficient in any area, then focus on, what can I do to make my strong areas shine? You're going to workshops about, putting your resume together. I don't know if you've been to the essay workshop yet. Maybe that was last night. But we're trying to help you prepare a successful university application. And so, be really mindful of those things that you have control over. If you were a weak student, the first couple years of school, there's nothing you can do about that at this point. Try to have a strong finish, certainly, but focus on those areas that you can affect, such as, putting together a memorable essay, resume, get teachers who can write recommendations, who really know you well, and that sort of thing. Reach out to university admission officers, ask if you can have an appointment, if you could talk to us one-on-one. Show your interest to universities. That's something that some universities will look closely at. They'll say, what is the demonstrated interest of this student that I'm seeing? Has he been engaged with us a lot? Anyway, I'm going down the list. So I have a counselor. My students follow the Cambridge O-levels and A-levels. This is an excellent question. Do they still have to take the English Proficiency Test? Unfortunately, it depends. A lot of universities are still going to want to see something, whether that's the TOEFL or maybe just the SAT. Some universities will look at how they did on the O-levels or the IGCSEs, and if they did really well in English. Or if after year one of the A levels, if the student did the AS level exams and happened to be in English, certainly, they may consider that in terms of waiving the English proficiency. And again, some universities will just say, yes, if you're in the A-level program, we'll waive, but the English proficiency. But unfortunately, you do have to ask each one, or again, look at their website. Yes, another question. Yes, on the Common App, you can choose. Actually, I believe you can choose to report the SAT to some and not others. Does TCU provide need-based scholarships? Thank you for asking. I'll get to the TCU presentation in just a couple of minutes, but yes, we do. Okay, here's one. If we speak English at home, but do not have it as our native language, do we still need English proficiency test? So on the Common Application, which most of you are going to be filling out rather than university-specific applications, on the Common Application, it asks you to report each language that you have, and you have choices, and you can answer more than one thing. So you can say Hindi, native language, yes. Spoken at home, yes. Then you can list English, and maybe you don't say it's native language, but you say it's spoken at home. Some universities will then waive English proficiency, but not all. Some are going to want to see, is it your native language? And I do see some students reporting 2 languages as native, and that's okay. So if you, and really there's no way for us to verify that. So we just trust in you that you're being honest about it. And usually it's apparent when we read other elements of your application anyway. But if you say your native language is English, then most universities will not expect any English exams for you. And yes, there's a question, will the October test be canceled? It could be. Yes, and thank you, Mr. Kumar mentioned that the SAT fee waiver, that your school counselor can help you with that. Absolutely. Yes, fee waivers generally do not impact admission decisions, but you still, I think sometimes we do look at that, and if a student has requested a fee waiver, we still need to make sure that they have appropriate financial resources to attend, our university. Okay, so there's another question, what if the university doesn't waive English proficiency, but we're not able to submit it? At this point, I think the expectation is going to be that, you've got plenty of time to take an English test before this application cycle is over. And given the fact that Duolingo is available anytime, night and day from your home, or if you don't have a good internet connection at your home, perhaps you can find, maybe a computer at your school or at a library or some public place to take that test. So I think most universities are going to expect it because of the ease of access. Okay, let's see. I'm going down getting close to the end of the questions. Okay, and then here's a question from Deekshanya. The language of instruction is, let's see. Oh yeah, I think I already answered that question. I'm in grade 11 right now. How can I prepare from now on for admission? That's a great question. What you're doing this weekend is preparing you. If you're in grade 11, congratulations that, you're preparing in advance. You will have plenty of time then to prepare for testing, submitting a preparing a winning essay. Now, a lot of universities that weren't previously test optional are test optional for fall 2021, but they may go back to requiring SATs, ACTs for students applying for fall 2022. So tune in. I can't begin to predict that yet. Oh, this is a good one. Okay. How would the universities know the number of times a student has taken the test if you only present the highest score? Good question. Yeah, we would not know it unless you submit all the scores, but otherwise, no, we wouldn't know it. Okay. Yeah, somebody's asking about A-levels, the exams being messed up. Universities understand that a lot of things went wrong this year with different tests, A-levels, O-levels, maybe Indian boards. And so we understand that. We're making accommodations. So, please just, if something, if you feel like there's something you need the universities to know that went wrong for you, just make that clear on the application. But for the next couple of years, I think we're all going to be a lot more flexible than normal as to what we see, on those applications or on those test scores. Okay, does U.S. citizen, U.S. passport holder studying Cambridge International Curriculum have to provide TOEFL scores? I would say most universities are not going to require English proficiency of U.S. citizens. Now, that doesn't mean you wouldn't want to take a test, especially if you've never lived in the U.S. Maybe your English language level is not as strong as it would be if you were living here in the U.S. You could certainly present a TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo, but probably most universities, between the fact that you're a U.S. citizen and you're doing the Cambridge curriculum, most aren't going to require English proficiency. And so here's a question about another question about being a U.S. citizen. How do I apply for scholarship under U.S. national or international student? Okay, so the best advice I have for you on this is don't worry so much about how do I apply? Do I apply as an international student or a U.S. student? Because that's not really the way it works. When you fill out the common application, there are just simple questions. There's not a separate application for international students or U.S. citizen. And so just think about the pure definition of your citizenship when you answer those questions. So the first question is, are you a U.S. citizen? Yes or no? If you're a U.S. citizen, you have to say yes. Now, you might have two passports. You have U.S. citizenship and Indian. There's another question on the Common App that gives you a chance to say that you're a U.S. dual citizen. And there you can write, India on the line next, asking for the second citizenship. But so it's not really a separate process for applying. You just need to answer those questions accurately. So the question about subject tests, and I apologize, I did not prepare for that in my remarks. Some universities are going to require SAT subject tests, especially like the very most competitive universities might look at SAT subject tests in the field that you're applying for. So if you're applying for engineering, they might want to see SAT subject tests in math or physics, something like that. And so definitely if those are required, then you will need to take those. But not as many universities require the subject tests. Okay, and again, here's a student saying they couldn't get the SATs due to COVID. Can I still get scholarships? That's going to be up to each university, but I think lots and lots of universities are going to be very flexible this year if you weren't able to test because of COVID. So you may, in fact, be able to get the same scholarships as a student who has no SATs. But again, that's a decision made by each university. And so for students who are applying for fall of 2022, when should you take the TOEFL? The TOEFL is valid for 2 years, so you can take that now if you would like. You could take it once just as kind of a practice. But certainly if you want to wait a while, you can. But I always think it's a good idea to start testing early and just get that out of the way and relax a little bit. Okay. And so I've got our talent scholarships for 4 years. That's going to be up to each university. Okay. And so I think most of these questions, I think I've gotten, here's the student asking about engineering. Will I get a scholarship? I think that's going to depend on the university. Some universities may have programs that are more competitive than others. For other universities, your choice of major makes no difference. So that's, again, going to be an individual decision by the university. And so I've gotten a few questions about TCU. So I have just a few minutes left, and I'm going to give you just a short overview of TCU. But I see one question right here. Does TCU charge application fees? We do. There's a $50 application fee, but you can also, on the Common application, just check the box saying, yes, I would like a fee waiver, and we will not question that. We actually do not require any additional information. Here, I forgot I had another picture. So this is Harman Chabra, who is our Next Genius, our top scholar this year. Actually, we have a number of Next Genius students, I believe 5 enrolling this fall, who all got some nice financial aid packages, but Harman got the big scholarship from us. And so this was this past January, which was the last time I was on a plane flight. So this was here in Mumbai. Okay, so just general information. At TCU, we enroll about 11,000 students total. 9,500 of those are undergraduates. And this mix is a little bit different from many of our peer institutions. A lot of universities that are similar in size to TCU may have much larger graduate populations, which especially if you're going into maybe some of the STEM areas or even business, if there's an overwhelming number of graduate students, then you might not get as much time with the professors. But at TCU, our main focus is undergraduates. So you should have access to everything and everyone, and you will find your professors reaching out to you, wanting to get to know you. It's been amazing this summer seeing the professors, interacting with the incoming students, by video chat and all kinds of things, but they really do want to know you on a very personal level. Our students come from all over the United States and from usually 85 to 90 countries around the world. Average class size for us is about 27. And the ratio is 13 to 1. But again, sometimes people look at the student to faculty ratio, but that doesn't necessarily tell you the average class size. So I would say the more important figure to know from each university is what is their average class size. Now, your first year, you will have a few big classes, but then they get smaller as you go on up every year. So a minute ago, I was talking about, how TCU was compared to other universities in our size range. And if you're looking at private universities in the US, TCU, with 11,000 total, that's considered to be fairly large. But we're compared to a second group frequently, and that is based on our athletic conference. And I know in India, you don't have that kind of thing. You don't have universities competing in sporting events. But in the US, for some of us, that's a huge deal. And, right now I am plotting the dates of the football games on my calendar and figuring out how I can watch. Uh, and so we are in, it's called the Big 12 Athletic Conference. And on the far left of this graph, you can see the small purple bar, that's TCU. And so this depicts the universities, the sizes of the universities in our athletic conference. And we are by far the smallest university in our conference. And yet we compete in this huge arena and against, the top sports programs in the country. And so it's really kind of cool because you've got that a tight-knit sense of community, relatively small classes, and yet these exciting major events. Now, sports this year, of course, we're going to have to be very careful on how we play, and there might not be fans in the stadium. But just the range of events and sheer, programming and resources, we'll have major concerts on campus and, all kinds of fun things. And so things that you might find at a larger university. And TCU is known for the school spirit and the excitement. It's very high energy, upbeat, very positive environment. We do get many questions about our middle name. What does the Christian in TCU mean? We get that from the church we were founded by back in the 1800s, but nowadays, you're free to believe whatever you wish, to practice any religious tradition that you wish, or none at all. So there is absolutely no pressure there. And that is different because at some church-related schools in the US, you have to take maybe a class on Christianity, something like that. TCU, you don't. So we're very welcoming to people from all backgrounds. And I'm running out of time. Devika, is it a hard stop at 8:45 or?
Sure, I think we can go around for like 2 to 3 minutes more.
Okay, perfect. So these are the different colleges or schools, academic divisions at TCU. The best known program is the Neely School of Business, typically ranked top 25 in the United States. So if any of you are interested in that, I highly recommend it. The College of Science and Engineering is also the other biggest program at TCU. And so the most popular majors in that college would be things like engineering, biology, computer science, physics, mathematics, and so on. And so many of our Indian students are actually going into those fields, into the STEM areas. So we are quite strong in that. And so I'm just going to flip through. Again, we have about 130 majors at TCU. So there's really, I hope, something for everything, that all of you can find something that you're interested in. So regarding financial aid for international students, we do have some generous financial aid programs. We can cover up to about 2/3 the cost of attendance. And SAT, ACT optional for next year, will be optional for next year. For fall of 2022, we have not yet decided. I'm hopeful though. Typically for TCU, if you have an SAT of around 1350 or ACT 29, then I would suggest you submit it. If it's lower than that, then you might just ask me before you submit it. And then you can see our English proficiency guidelines. If you have a good SAT, we're not going to require English proficiency. But as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't hurt to go ahead and just prepare and take an English proficiency test. And then the last thing I'll say is one of the things that makes TCU special is our location in Fort Worth. It's an amazing city. It's, for Indian standards, it will seem quite small to you. We are the 13th largest city in the US. And the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so we're about 45 minutes drive from Dallas, and we share an international airport, so it's fairly easy to get here. So the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is the 4th largest metro area in the United States. So big metropolitan area, and yet Fort Worth compared to Dallas, Fort Worth is a little smaller. So in some ways, it has more of that small town charm and friendliness and ease of getting around. And like TCU, it's very friendly and hospitable. It's a beautiful city. And the campus itself. I hope you guys will get a chance to check out our video tour because we have a absolutely breathtakingly beautiful campus. Most of our facilities are new here or newly renovated, so I hope you'll be impressed with what you see. So here is my contact information. If any of you have questions that I was not able to get to, please follow up with me after today, but I think my time is out, so I need to give you a quick break before your next session. So best wishes to all of you. Devika, thank you for being here, and thank you for allowing me to address the group. And you guys had great questions. I'm so impressed with the level of questions that I heard. So very good.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for such an insightful session. And I must say, you've answered to all the questions with so much detailing. And I think those questions were really in need of today's time about testing. So just before closing, I would like to mention two things. Of course, there were many questions where students were asking about scholarships. So again, if you're a grade 12 student and you're concerned about scholarship, again, you can definitely apply to Next Genius and win a chance to, win full tuition scholarships to colleges in the United States, and Texas Christian University is again one of our partner colleges. And we also have a wonderful resource that is called a 51 essay book, that is 51 essays written by Indian students. It's a book compiled by Dr. Neeraj Manna. So again, so much you'll be requiring to know about how to write your Common App essays. So do check out our website for the book. And thank you once again, Karen.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.